There's plenty of business to go around, and rising tides raise all ships. That and again, in any industry, there's people who are going to be the market leaders. There's going to be some folks in the middle of the pack, and then there's going to be laggards. And unfortunately, the laggards, regardless of industry, are the ones who give the rest of the industry a black eye. That used car salesman. I'll tell you, I go out to Davidson's. I have the best experience every time I go out there. So that used car salesman is not them, but we all know what we're talking about.
Hey, I'm here with my good friend Matt Dinsmore. He is a Northern Colorado entrepreneur, father, businessman, and a staple here in this community. He is going to share some of his story growing up as an entrepreneur with some really high-value lessons about leadership and business. Check it out. Matt Dinsmore.
Mr. Shoup, thank you.
Dude, welcome. We've known each other 3 decades.
It's been a while. We were talking leading into this middle school at Conball.
Conball. Were you Edmondson?
I wasn't. I was Monroe. So Monroe, my sister went to Mary Blair, then fed into Conball, because I remember you as a 6th grader, and then, and me as a big 7th grader. And then at Loveland High, I want to say it was my sophomore or junior year where we really connected. You were working at Subway.
Yeah, we had some mutual friends and working at Subway. I was a year ahead in Spanish. So I think I was in Spanish class with some of your good friends from the baseball team.
Joe and Donovan.
Joe, Donovan, Chris. Yeah. Donovan, what's up? I know he's here in Windsor.
He's in Windsor.
Joe moved away.
Joe is in Sterling, Kansas.
Yes. Yeah. Man, so we've got tons of history.
It's been
tons of stories.
Through college and through, if I remember right, I may have been one of your first 10 painting projects.
I think you were. Yes, because I had transitioned out of the college painters into mortgage, and then right as that was all, they let me go, right? And it was like, go time. Got to go do this, and painted one of your rentals. Was it your house?
It was my house. We had it was my grandparents' house. When they passed away, I bought it from the estate, and we had a bedroom that my prior roommate had painted black, like the whole bedroom.
Yes.
And I'm like, dude, I've run 4 coats of paint. I can't get this. And that's where you came back in. And we had a corkboard wall too that was acting really funny.
Man, and that was probably 20 years ago.
Yeah. 2002, maybe 2003.
I was still with College Painters. I might have done it when I was with College Painters, possibly.
I think it was on your own. Okay. Because I remember College Painters. I was still mowing lawns when you were doing out at Boyd Lake. You were still doing door to door.
I was banging door to door. Yeah. So 05, 6, 7. I was crushing the door to door. That's all I was doing to get business back then. And then bird dogging at Home Depot. That was my backup strategy.
I remember, and we won't say names, but I was mowing a house on the lake, and they asked for a quote, and you're like, just tear the siding off, because it was so
I remember
bad.
that one. Yeah, it was rough. It was rough shape. There's no way I could have handled that back then. I was pretty new, pretty green to the business. I do remember that house though.
What's funny is they've actually re-sided it.
They did.
Every time we drive by, because it was all exposed 1970s wood.
That was the old school, the east side of the lake, right? Old school. Yes. Well, it's funny because you and I both cut our teeth in business. We're both sitting here with successful companies, Northern Colorado, real involved in the community. But while I think I share other kids were getting stuff handed to them and bought for them by parents, having fun, you were out grinding. You built a 6-figure business in high school. Cutting grass, right?
So in high school, it was really Chris Humphreys and myself. We were mowing. We didn't get to 6 figures in high school, but it was great because we both played sports. And if you wanted a real, quote unquote, real job, nobody was going to work with your schedule, especially baseball and football and life. So our sophomore, junior year, we started mowing. And, at that point, we were borrowing my dad's truck and a friend's trailer, and we blew a couple of small engines. And then by our senior year, we were mowing 40 or 45 yards a week, which was, when you're 17, 18 years old, you're making $1,000 a week.
Yes.
It was that first taste of, holy cow, I can control my schedule and I'm making exponentially more than my friends that are doing the same thing, but for somebody else.
Yeah, your eyes get open to the things they don't teach you in school. Other than like Finley, because he was the econ teacher and your coach. So he had to be sharing that stuff with you.
Well, Finn and Gary Light.
Yes, Gary.
Because I tell people Loveland. So Loveland, anybody new to Loveland, old Loveland was not the same as new Loveland. And my kids are now 5th generation Loveland. So, looking back at my daughter last year, she was giving me a hard time. She's like, half my teachers you either coached when I coached baseball or DECA,
Yes.
or they were your teacher, like Mike Felton. And I go, and she's like, isn't it kind of lame? And I'm like, is it lame? You're going to the same exact high school your grandfather went to. And then my grandfather, her great grandfather went to Bill Reed.
And so, because we rolled in here from Jersey, so we're first generation. But yeah, I didn't realize that you had that many back that were here.
Well, it's interesting because now with my children, like I was talking about, Loveland in the 90s, it was half the size.
Yeah.
And you only had 2 high schools. You had Loveland and TV. You didn't have Res. You didn't have Mountain View. You didn't have Loveland Classical.
No.
And so guys like Gary Light or Coach Finley, some of those early ons of, yes, grades are important. Yes, college is the route for some people, but there's also a way to forge forward creating value for yourself. And that was, Gary Light with DECA, which I know you did, and just the idea of like, here's how you keep track of who owes you money, and here's the schedule and things that you learned early on of. I remember it was Chris and I, and we hired his little brother, Mikey. And, I think we paid Mike like $40 a week to help us, but $40 a week for a 8th grader, and Mike as an 8th grader was the size of a senior. So he's really strong.
They were both big boys.
They were big boys. But that was the first chance. And then I went away to college, and we basically gave the business to Mike. And Mike was a freshman in high school. And I think all of a sudden it was like, holy cow, it was more than he could handle. He was doing the best he could, but he wasn't old enough to drive. And I remember it was the first time I got a call from clients that you'd been mowing their yard for 4 or 5 years going, well, can you come mow it this weekend? I'm like, well, I'm in Grand Junction. I can't just come home and mow the yard. And so when I came back from college, that was what I started back up. So when I was 19, we built that up to where we were doing about 120 yards a week.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So, and like you worked for some other people and said, here's what I like, here's what I don't like. And for me, that was, you were young, so you're tan, you were in great shape. You worked like 2.5 days a week, but it paid for a chunk of college and the ability to travel.
Yeah. So when you started that business, I mean, other than the teachers that you mentioned, your dad's a business guy, right? Is like business run in the family? Did you have that growing up, that exposure to entrepreneurship?
So without a doubt, my mom was a nurse at McKee. My dad had retail liquor stores in Denver in the 70s and early 80s. Then he went to work for Behringer Winery when it was owned by Nestle Chocolate. Then he went to work for a small family winery called Mirasu. And then he went to work for this little company called Louis Vuitton. And everybody's like, especially women, their eyes, oh, your dad sold handbags. I'm like, no, he was on the alcohol side. So he had the background of small business. Mm-hmm. And even though he loved his job, he always, growing up, like, you have to have a side gig. If you're going to get ahead, whether it's real estate, whether it's a small business, you have to be grinding, because when you're working for a big company, you're only as good as the regime you're with. Yeah. And so, we'd grown up in high school. He helped Chris and I set it up. We got to steal all his tools. I remember him fixing a couple of engines we seized up, and he was really the driving force of, if you guys want to do this. And then in college, there were certain times, hey, Dad, I remember the first time I went to get a Walker lawnmower, a new one, and going to the old Home State Bank. And at the time, I think the mower was like $12,000.
That's tons of money back then.
Well, and I remember going in being like, hey, I got plenty of cash, but you have no credit. That was something Finn and Gary Light had talked about, so I wasn't like completely naive to it. But you don't realize it takes a while to build that credit. And I'll never forget I'm sitting with Shannon Medlicott's mom, Debbie Doyle.
Okay, yeah.
filling out the form, everything. And then Roy Bischoff, Carson Bischoff's dad, walks down the hallway, who'd been my basketball coach. Because Debbie tells the story now. She's like, there's no way in hell I was giving you that loan. Like, it was not happening.
Denied.
And Roy kind of pulled me aside and he's like, he's good for it, you know. And that was my first time dealing with the bank and realizing, yeah, you may have had $5,000, but you needed the other 8. And how does that relationship with your banker work out?
And that was back in the days where you had the, hey, I know this guy, good people, good family, good old boy. You get the stamp.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Now, those days are gone.
Those are gone. Yeah.
Gone.
Yeah.
But again, Roy, you know, if he wouldn't have been walking down the hallway to go to the restroom and seen me at that time, because that was really what allowed us to grow from really pushing. You know, you went from, hey, we can do X amount a day to X times 4, X times 5. And in college, you know, I had a 4-man crew. We'd work Wednesdays and Thursdays, and you'd work 16, 18-hour days. We'd mow our commercial stuff at 4 a.m. by street light because you had no parking issues. And then, you know, a couple of the mowers, we had lights on. So when it was dusk or even dark, you could finish up your day.
And then did you eventually sell that business? So you had given it to Chris's brother, to Mike, but then came back after college, built it up even more. And then what did you eventually do with it? I thought you sold it.
So I was gone a year in Grand Junction, totally homesick. Like I was really homesick. I love Donovan, but you know, having a room this size and a roommate, after a year, I was good. So I came back, built it up, and then my father left Louis Vuitton in the summer of 2000, and we'd always talked about doing a liquor store together.
Yes.
And, you know, we were all 20. We knew how to drink. Didn't know anything about retail, nothing about business. And so for the first year and a half, I did the liquor store with my dad, and then we mowed, because we were only doing it 2.5 days a week. Sold it August 1st of 2001.
Okay.
So you talk about timing, a month and a half later, it would have been worth half.
Yes.
And, you know, you had the recession of 01, 02. Obviously, September 11th changed things immensely, and was able to take some of that seed money to become partners in Wilbur's in Fort Collins.
Man, so my son and daughter, they remind me of this constantly. I don't know about your kids, but they're like, dude, you're ancient. Like, you got gray hair. Look, your hair's coming. That's why I keep it short. It grows in gray. You're ancient. We're in our 40s, right? But you're 20. So you literally started a business. You got some help, some equipment, right? Some help from dad to start this business, grow this, sell this. You're 20 years old at that point, right? Mm-hmm. So if you got a high schooler listening to this right now, shoot, maybe even a middle schooler, and they can't get a job, or they don't want to go work a job. They're like, there's something about business. Like, what are those practical steps to get started? If a high school's watching this, listening to this right now.
So speaking, because my daughter's a junior,
yes.
My son's in 7th grade. The thing I would tell young people is there's 2 things. We're in our 40s. I am a hell of a lot more tired now than I used to be. So there's something to be said about being young and, quite frankly, having some more energy. But don't be scared to ask questions, whether it's your mom, it's your aunt, it's your uncle, it's your neighbor, and find something that, I'm not going to say you love doing, because once you get paid for it, it's a job, regardless of what it is. But find something you enjoy, that there's a spark, and that you can possibly excel at and scale. Yeah. And for me, it was mowing yards. You looked at it and said, hey, at that time we were charging $15-$20 a yard, and people were excited to have me show up so they didn't have to do it. Then it grew into, okay, we're doing landscaping, we're doing rock, we never did snow removal because I didn't want to get up at 2 a.m. and beat the hell out of my truck. Whether it's painting houses, whether it's, you know, if you have any mechanical skills. I've got a nephew who's 22 who is crushing it because he does yards, he does painting, he does fences, he does odd jobs. And Brendan, I'm so proud of him. 22 years old. He just bought his first 4-plex in Greeley.
Beautiful.
And you look at it and you go, guys, there's jobs. Okay. I have a job I have to show up to X amount of hours a week. my job is to put out fires. It's no longer the easy stuff. It's when stuff's wrong.
Yeah.
Learning that early on, the problem solving, the young people show up. Like if you show up, you're going to be about 80% ahead of all your peers.
And 25 years ago, like what we have showing up right now ain't a whole lot.
No.
Sorry, guys. It's not.
It's different. And in this
Times have changed.
generation's defense, I'm sure our parents said the same stuff about us.
Yes.
You know,
True.
it's probably an evolution of wants and needs and what people are willing to do. I tell people all the time, learning a trade, even if you go on to college. I mean, I'm a big supporter of higher education if it's right for you.
Yeah.
But for me, going to get a liberal arts degree, let's be realistic about what that does and what kind of income potential there is. Now, if you're into that, get the liberal arts degree, but learn about, is it a trade? Is it a skill? Is it something that brings value? Because at the end of the day, people are willing to pay for value.
Whatever that is.
Yeah.
And I mean, we just started having the internet show up. Remember the dial-up, AOL, right?
I didn't have internet till college.
Okay. So yeah, and same here. I don't even think I had it for the first year or two of college. But I mean, you're talking, right, old school, mowing lawns, working on houses. But now, age of the internet, you get a laptop, you get some kind of skill set. Joey and I were just talking with Joey, video production, all kinds of other things that encompass the internet that somebody technically in middle school, high school could totally fire up and get going. I love that.
And the ability, I would argue, now there's people who do business, right? There's legitimate where you're paying taxes and have a legitimate business set up. Mm-hmm. Well, as a kid, you don't have to be legitimate.
Yep.
You know, nobody's going to go, the IRS isn't going to go after a 17 or an 18-year-old for not paying taxes. Now, I'm not saying run that way forever. You have to, at some point, legitimize the business. But mistakes are made. And that's one thing I love, peer-to-peer. Matt and I get together every 4 to 6 months.
Yeah.
And, hey, what issues are you challenged with? Because if you're dealing with an issue that I can learn from, or better yet, I've already dealt with and help you, if you can get those bumps out of the road when you're younger or at somebody else's expense, you're going to be that much further ahead.
Yeah. A big shout out and thank you to one of our sponsors, M&D Painting and Roofing. M&D was actually founded by my wife, Emily, and I back in 2005. And for the last 2 decades, we've been here in northern Colorado of one of the leaders in residential and commercial repainting, as well as most recently installing residential roofs. So if you need to paint, re-roof, you got hit by a hailstorm, we can take care of whatever your home needs from top to bottom. You can find us on the web at mandepainting.com. Hey, just want to give a big shout out to one of our sponsors, Imprint Digital. If you're a small business owner, one of the things that you need to navigate to be successful is all things online and digital in terms of marketing and your messaging. Imprint Digital, they're the real deal. They are the professionals and they know this world inside and out. Make sure to visit their website at imprint-digital.com. It's easier to lose everything when you're in high school or college and it's a couple $1,000.
Well, when you're living for free and it's mom and dad's basement. And, and we had this discussion last time I was here of as you employ more team members, you know, I tell people all the time, we are only as good as our team. And I'll tell you, pre-COVID, I'd have put us up against anybody. Product knowledge, service, selection, everything, customer service. Well, then you have disruptions. For 3 years, oh, you can fog a mirror, we're going to hire you. We just had to get people in the door. Yep. Well, some of those things slipped. And so we've been really working the last year on how do we get back to where we used to be. And, you know, some of that was out of our control. But if you can learn these things from the safety of not really having to produce income, it's much, much less stressful.
And we squirreled a little bit because you were chronologically sharing getting out of the lawn business, getting into the liquor store with Dad. And now, you know, today you guys own 2 very big, very successful liquor stores. You've got Wilbur's up in Fort Collins and Longmont is
Wyatt's Wet Goods.
Wyatt's in Longmont. So, you know, you've got a big, big liquor store, right? You're sitting on how much inventory. Like it's a lot of moving parts. It's a lot going on.
So both stores. So Dad, when he left LVMH, we bought an existing store called Beverage Nation, and everybody goes, "What the hell's Beverage Nation? Are you a pop wholesaler? Do you guys, what do you do?" And we rebranded. It was Wilbur's Wines and Spirits. We were next to the old Wild Oats across from the mall in Fort Collins.
Yeah.
And then in 2004, Whole Foods announced they were coming to town. And we went over to Whole Foods, said, 800-pound gorilla's coming. What's your plan? And they said, well, we're going to restripe the parking lot and we're going to paint the deli. And you're like, oh, we've got all our eggs in one basket here, and this is not going to be good for us. So we relocated next to Whole Foods. We had to go out and raise equity. We brought in some partners. We didn't have the ability to, raise millions to expand. But now Wilbur's is 24,000 square feet. Yeah. And, pre-wine and grocery store, which I try not to go down that rabbit hole too far. But we were about 45 team members in Fort Collins. My dad retired in 2014, found out quickly that he wasn't done. Local developer Allen Ginsberg, he's since passed, great guy, but he came to Dad and he said, hey, you did a store in Denver in the 70s, you did one in Aurora in the 80s, you did Wilbur's in the 00s, you got one more in you. And so at that point, he came out of retirement. He and my wife, Lindsay, opened Wyatt's with some investors down at the old Twin Peaks Mall in Longmont.
Yes, yeah.
So,
and we were talking a little offline about COVID and what business and just the landscape of just people and business and your business looked like before, during, and after. So talk about some of that experience, because we were just digging into, COVID brought out the best and the worst in people. It was great for your business because everybody went and drank.
For 2 years.
Yeah.
And they were blowing in their coffee mug of bourbon. Nobody knew it was bourbon in your coffee mug on your Zoom call. For us, COVID was interesting. 2016, we come to a compromise with grocery store to allow full-strength beer in a grocery for the first time since 1933. And so 2019 was January 1st, the first year that roughly 4,000 accounts, we had 4,000 new competitors that year. So 2019 sucked.
So all of your sales that were the full strength, right, 6% that they were coming to liquor stores for, they can go to any grocery store.
Any grocery store, CVS, Walgreens, Mexican Bottega, anywhere that had low-proof beer overnight got full strength. Yeah. And so Costco came in, and there were some buyout provisions, but you read the writing on the wall and go, hey, things are going to change. Each state has different liquor laws, but we helped craft this. So 2019 was horrible, just horrible. And then COVID, I remember we were in Italy the first time I heard about coronavirus, January of 2020. And by day 10, it was like, we need to get home. Like something weird is happening. And we got home and the States were probably 6 weeks behind, really.
Yeah.
But then all of a sudden, all our bar and restaurant friends, they were shuttered. It was really right around St. Patty's Day that things really sped up. Kids went home from spring break and never went back to school. Yeah. And for our business, all of a sudden, people had nothing else to do. Us and, I hate to say it, the pot shops really were two of the people besides online delivery folks that your business really took off.
That they were essential, right? Gyms may or may not have been, right? Because we had the nice experience with NOCO we'd love to talk about. But yeah, and then people flocked to those two things.
Well, and it was really odd because you went from literally having 2019 challenges every which way you looked to 2020. There were times, I remember when Mayor Hancock shut down Denver, they were going to close liquor stores. And so we had to close the front door. We had probably 400 people in the store and have a line down the sidewalk in front of Whole Foods back to the railroad tracks. It was like a college bar for 2 hours, 2 out, 1 in, 2 out, 1 in. And then we had the conversation with the city manager, Darren Atterbury at the time. And I'm like, Darren, this is not me being greedy business person. This is you shut down bars and restaurants. Okay, whether you like it or not, somewhere between 12 and 15% of the U.S. population have alcohol issues. So you want to not, because at first it was flatten the curve, right? Well, you don't want to overrun the ER with folks that you've taken away their access to a product we provide. And then we actually had Homeland Security come into the store to help us figure out how we were going to secure it, because we were one of the places that would get looted.
Absolutely. Yeah. I remember you and I might have talked about that, right? When that was all going on.
Oh, it was crazy.
Yeah.
We had our bunks of plywood set up that I got. You need 200 feet of chain. And I'm like, what do we need chain for? Well, when you're looting, if you fill up your grocery cart, you can loot so much more than what you can carry. You need to line your vans 20 feet from the front of the store. Well, why? Well, so people don't drive through the store. And here's the guys you're going to hire, and they're going to shoot some people. And I'm like, I don't want to shoot. I really don't want to hurt anybody. And they're like, well, if you don't shoot them, they just keep looting. It was such a weird time, not just with our business, I'm sure with your business, with restaurants, name the business. But it goes back to when I'm talking to the high school students of learning that ability to adapt, that ability to morph, that ability to meet your team where they're at, because everybody's facing a different challenge.
Yeah, it was real quick. We didn't know what was going to happen. It felt like there was a week where just nobody knew what was going on, right? Then the question of essential, are you an essential business, and what classifies that? And then, restaurants were in trouble, like right away. Gyms were shut down. We had just purchased this building. So we literally took all of our business savings and real estate savings. We had that little painter shop in North Loveland, sold that, right? Oh, we're doing the 1031, found this building. We're going to renovate it. So we buy this January 31st, 2020. This room that we're sitting in, from ceiling to floor, everything was ripped up so we could expand the gym, because the gym runs underneath us right now where we sit, and rip all that up. And then we had it all ripped up end of February. 2 weeks later, boom, shut down. And NoCo Jiu-Jitsu, they're the main tenant in this building, space and utilization wise. Like, oh, shit, what's going to happen? So the gym was the biggest one that was affected. Painting, actually, that was a great year for us. We opened up our roofing division during that. We had come off a 2019 hailstorm, so we actually saw an uptick. And we had to manipulate and change the way we did business. We had to be more careful. But the gym was interesting. So we went fully online, and then we got into some friction with the health department, and ultimately made some calls with and towards them to not allow them here. But they were overstepping and over pushing, and that was not okay.
It was so odd, when all of a sudden you have officials coming in saying, "Hey, Matt, we're really glad you're here, but here's the rules." And I remember, so we collect sales taxes for this city and the state.
Yeah.
Okay, in 2020, we've been open 20 years. I want to say it was March, and you're looking at, okay, we're going to be shuttered. And you're looking at it from a cash flow perspective of all of a sudden, for us, cash comes in, we pay our vendors, we pay our team. Well, if all of a sudden your cash flow is cut off, most businesses I know operate on that cash flow. They're not, yes, you have reserves, but it's not nearly enough to cover everything.
It can almost feel like it's never enough. Like, how long can any business go without sales? I mean, with whatever the expense, whatever the size, that's tons of reserves that most businesses don't have.
No, most businesses don't, and especially a business, from retail, you buy product for X, you mark it up Y. We're working on low margins. I tell people all the time, our rent is $58,000 a month. So just before you open the doors, that's the nut to crack. Before you turn on the lights and the AC or have cold beer. But I remember I want to say it was March, because our sales taxes are due the city on the 20th. And at that point, Hancock had just announced they were going to shut liquor stores in Denver. It was like a run on the bank, but run on the liquor stores. Yeah. And I called the sales tax lady at the city of Fort Collins. I said, "Hey, I just want you to know there's some uncertainty here. Cash is king. I am not paying our sales taxes on time for the first time in 20 years. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, whatever the fine is, I get it. And she's like, "Matt, first off, we love you. I was in this morning. My husband was in 2 days ago stocking up." And she said, "We understand. Call me when you're ready and I'll come get the check from you." Because at that point, the city had closed, everything was kind of a standstill. And that was when you're like, okay, if the city of Fort Collins, who's fairly inflexible most of the time, is like, hey, Matt, we understand. Let us know when you're ready. And, 4 or 5 days later, we kind of weathered that little storm, had a better feel what was going on. She came in and we got her paid and everything was good.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, okay, what's the fine? And she's like, Matt, you're the least of our worries right now. Because she said, everybody stopped paying sales taxes, not just you.
Yeah, man.
So back to young people, that ability, it's kind of like riding your bike. If you learn to ride a bike at 4 or 5, you're going to be much better at it than if you waited till you were 20.
Yeah.
And then when you fall off and you're 4 or 5, it doesn't hurt nearly as bad.
Yeah, I love that, man. Love that. So we jumped all over the place. We were talking about some really great value, really great advice for young people or anybody in business. I remember as a kid, because I worked for Steve Lauer. So Steve Lauer he's owned all different chains of restaurants, but it was Subway, eventually ended up in Qdoba. But I worked under, Gerald Ferrara.
Yeah.
Right. So his
wife's our dentist.
Really?
Nicole, she's great.
Yeah. They're opening up the Gold's Gym just over here.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Out at the yards, the old outlets. There's going to be a big Gold's Gym there. But I worked for Gerald. And I remember my uncle at the time was a home builder. He was always an entrepreneur, sales guys, and some of the best advice he ever gave me was, "Hey, if you want to learn about business, become successful in business, go find somebody who did it." And I'm in middle school, working hourly at his tanning salon in Campus West, just helping out over there, right? And he's like, "Steve owns the Subway right down the shopping complex. Go ask Steve to lunch, take him to lunch. He won't go to lunch with me. He's a successful business guy. He's in his 20s, I think, right at the time. Like, just go ask. Don't be afraid to go ask somebody who's successful in business, out to lunch, out to coffee, pick their brain. Most of the time they'll say yes, and they'll give you that advice. So I just started doing that from an early age. That was some of the best advice that I ever got.
What I have found is that most business people want to help other people be successful.
Yes.
Because when you look at the ratios, what is it? 80% of businesses fail in 4 or 5 years. It's really stacked against you. And you'll find that seasoned business veterans do want to mentor people because most of them were mentored by somebody, whether it's business, whether it's real estate.
Yeah.
I know Fort Collins, we have 55 competitors. 15 of us get together once a month and have lunch. Now, we beat the shit out of each other all day long because you're selling Jack Daniels for X or New Belgium for Y. But you look at it and you go, okay, what is going on? What's going on in your business? And over the last 25 years, I've found that with most business people, it's either people, whether it's your team or customers. It's business. You don't have enough or you have too much. You're growing too fast.
Yep.
And then there's about 4 or 5 other things, depending on the business, that you're not recreating the wheel. And having experts is great. I absolutely say hire a good accountant, have a great relationship with insurance or a banker. But all of those relationships cost money. And I love our accounting firm. They're excellent. We couldn't do it without them. But also to have friendships with people, whether they're in the same industry or not. Sometimes we've had this discussion of, in our industry, we put on blinders and I only look at these things. And then it takes somebody from, the painting or the roofing industry or a gym to go, well, have you looked at it this way?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You know what you know what you don't know, but it's that you don't know what you don't know. And then somebody shows you that. You're like, huh. Some of our best ideas have come from that.
Well, and it's funny because in Beverage Alcohol, we're members, and the other one is associations. Because there are people in the roofing industry in the Southeast who, guess what? They're doing some stuff that you may or may not make sense of. We do this best practices with retailers coast to coast. I was talking to a guy in New York yesterday, and I said, "Hey, I saw your thing on Facebook. Can I have the rights to plagiarize that?" He's like, "Absolutely, Matt." He was so excited that I gave him a call. He's like, "I appreciate you calling, by all means, reproduce it, put it out there. We're not competitors, but what are the best practices, whether it's your industry or even another industry?
Well, I found here locally, like I remember back in the day, because I came out pretty hard and heavy into painting. Again, I was knocking on doors, and we targeted a couple of neighborhoods. We had signs everywhere, sign spinners everywhere, and a lot of painters didn't like that. So I remember going down to the paint store. I mean, it was like getting ready for war. They'd be mean mugging you and standing over at the donuts and the coffee, or just straight up wanting to fight you in the parking lot. And I just remember at one point, I'm like, guys, how many houses are there in Fort Collins? You couldn't paint every house in Fort Collins. When's the last time you even painted a house in this neighborhood that we're painting a lot of houses in? There's plenty of business to go around.
There's plenty of business to go around, and rising tides raise all ships. That and again, in any industry, there's people who are going to be the market leaders. There's going to be some folks in the middle of the pack, and then there's going to be laggards. And unfortunately, the laggards, regardless of industry, are the ones who give the rest of the industry a black eye. That used car salesman. I'll tell you, I go out to Davidson's. I have the best experience every time I go out there. So that used car salesman is not them, but we all know what we're talking about.
If your life or business are cluttered up with junk right now, then you've got to reach out to one of our sponsors, Hulk Addicts Hauling. Hulk Addicts can come out to your home or business to do anything from removing junk to appliances. Maybe you're demoing or doing construction on a property and you need it cleared out. Maybe you need a big dumpster dropped off that they can roll off later. Make sure to check them out at hulkaddictsjunk.com. They are serving all of Northern Colorado as well as up and down the Front Range. Hey, if you're a business owner and you need to do some renovation in your space or possibly build a building from the ground up, you have to connect with one of our sponsors, Mendel Construction. Mendel Construction is a commercial construction company that's been around since 1997, serving all of Colorado. They can do a small tenant finish all the way up to ground up construction of a new building for your business. Check them out at mendelandcompany.com. That's MENDEL and company.com. If you're a Christian small business owner and you live in Northern Colorado, you have to check out one of our sponsors, the Foundry Advisory. The Foundry is a Christian executive peer advising group that connects other business owners in the community to help you focus on your faith, your life, your leadership, and your business. Make sure to check them out at thefoundryadvisory.com. Or the Chuck in the truck painter, the drunk guy in the truck, and you don't know if the job's going to get done or lots of other things.
Yeah. I mean, we've seen it with restoration companies. We've seen it with renovations. I tell people all the time, we sell an age-restricted product. That is the one thing we can't fuck up. Like, it's very simple. We can't sell to kids. And I think anybody with a moral compass subscribes to that. But I have competitors who that's how they make their money.
There was one, Loveland High, that we all knew.
Well, yeah.
There was a building there. It's not there anymore.
They just tore it down.
They tore it down.
You go get your tobacco, your Playboy or Penthouse, and your 3-2 beer at the time. And he did not care.
Whatever happened to that guy?
I have no idea.
Was the name they called him his real name?
I don't think so.
No.
Looking back, I'm like, it's a fairly racist name, but everybody knew who it was.
I mean, when you said that name, you knew what it meant, and everybody knew that.
In Fort Collins, I could have told you one of our competitors that a suitcase, and this was 10 years ago, a suitcase of Bud Light was $10.
Yep.
Or, sorry, $20.
Yep.
But if you rolled in and you had a Fort Collins High School ID, it was $50. And it was, it was common knowledge. And I've told people, I'm like, guys, doing business, you have to do it right, regardless of industry. For us, you don't want somebody drunk driving and killing a minivan full of kids. Whether it's painting, whether it's, you name the industry, there are certain rules you sign up to and industry standards that you need to adhere to.
Yeah, not everybody does that, and that's a bummer. And I mean, there's a lot on the line, especially in your business if you guys do that. And they're coming out, I'm sure, size and scope of your business. They're checking on you.
Well, we check on ourselves. We pay a service to. I mean, yes, we get stung. It's still weird for me. You have to be 21 to buy tobacco. Like that. We're talking about, we're not old, but we're not young anymore. So you got to be 21 to buy tobacco. So we have tobacco stings.
Since when?
Like 4 or 5 years
really?
ago.
See, I didn't even know that.
Yeah.
Are you serious? Okay.
So what's nice is we've always said you have to be 21 to buy anything in our store. And the reason being is, we got a bad example because Whole Foods, it didn't happen. But when we were next to Wild Oats, we had a guy who'd come over every day. He'd get a 20-ounce Pepsi and a package of cigarettes. He was like 19 or 20. And then one day we noticed he had a 6-pack of Fat Tire. And he'd built this rapport because he came in every day on his break, bought his smokes and his pop, and then he got brazen. And all of a sudden,
Gave it a try.
Well, and we sold to him because we dealt with him every day for 2 years. And that's where we said, you know what? You can't buy pop. You can't buy ice. You can't buy wine glasses for grandma. If you're not 21, we don't want you in here. Now, if you're with your parent or guardian, that's one thing. But, and when you go online, Yelp. Hate Yelp personally because you can't really defend yourself. But that's our number one complaint. They're assholes about ID. And I go, that's our one thing we can't mess up. If you're drunk, you're high, or you're underage, we don't want your business.
Yeah.
Now, otherwise, I want everybody's business, just not those three.
So we were talking offline. What I thought was super interesting because we get together a lot and we talk about business a lot. We always default to business and the issues, right? People, the business, the market, the dynamic, Northern Colorado. But then we just started talking a little bit more, just at a deeper level of like, why do we do this every day, right? We're middle age. We've spent this first half of our professional life planting these seeds and building these things. And we talked about that. It's never enough, right? For guys like you, guys like me. It's like, I've got this many doors of real estate. You've got this many doors. You're like, this guy's, and we just start talking about that. But where do you think that comes from? Because I know a lot of business owners experience that. There's that thrill in the chase and the build, right? But if you're 18-year-old Matt looking at 45-year-old Matt, where he's at, 18-year-old Matt's like, that's awesome. I'd love to be there. But then we get there and it's like, but I want to be here. So how do you work through that? Because we got in a pretty deep conversation. We had a couple of coffees and I was like, damn, that's really worth thinking about.
It's,
and
we've had this conversation. It's really interesting because I think it's kind of like a fork. There's multi-prongs here. You have the part that you build teams. And again, let's be clear here. We are only as good as our teams. And there are seasons when our teams are amazing and there's seasons that we can be better. But it's a spark, and I think some people refer to it like athletes. Okay, I played sports. I was on the team. I wasn't that good at most things, but I was part of the team. Yep. But you have that competitive drive. Some of those guys and gals go on to compete collegiately. Very few go professionally, but some of them do. And that really is what ignites them, and for me, that wasn't it. It was how do you do this? It's a challenge. Every day is a different challenge. For me, there's a responsibility absolutely to our teams and shareholders. And when I say shareholders, I don't mean partners, because that's when people talk about shareholders. Oh, you're just talking about the P&L and how much money you can spin off. And I go, no, we have shareholders. We have a responsibility to the city of Fort Collins to collect sales taxes that go to roads and parks and schools. We have a responsibility to our nonprofits we work with. You think about your scholarships you do and the different organizations that the more successful the business is, the more we can do to give back to the community.
Yes.
And I tell people all the time, when you're shopping with small businesses or locally owned businesses, they're going to do exponentially more in your community than whatever the big guy is, regardless of industry. So the shareholders, and then the shareholders of your team. And at Wilbur's, I have, myself included, there's 3 of us who have just started our 24th year. You don't hear that anymore. Yeah. I probably got 8 people who have been there a decade. And there are certain positions where there's churn. You get a college kid, you get a year or two. I always tell people the first 6 months, Wilbur's is like fucking Disneyland. This is the best job ever. I love it. Da 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 da. Then after about 6 months, a year to a year and a half or so, okay, it's a job. The novelty wears off. And then at a certain point, you get to, and I think this is all industries and all life, but okay, Matt's a dick and I'm kind of sick of this, and the grass gets greener.
Me or you? Which Matt?
Well, both of us are dicks.
We both are.
Yeah.
Yeah, we are. You gotta be sometimes though, right?
Well, but I don't necessarily think, I tell people there's times, like I'm super easy till it's time we got to change something. But it's like anything, the novelty, it becomes a job, it becomes a hassle, and there's a shinier, brighter thing out there.
Yeah.
And we have this conversation with our team of, guys, this is a stepping stone to what you really want to do when you grow up. And if you want to work retail, absolutely wonderful, but it's nights, it's holidays, it's weekends. It's a grind. Painting houses is not easy. Roofing is not easy. But with that said, that team, we recently had a team member pass away on Christmas Eve. And sad deal. He and I had been talking, 66 years old. He'd been at Wilbur's for over a decade. He opened the Whole Foods in 2004. We've been friends for 20 years. And, before he passed away, we were talking about cutting back and enjoying life more, taking Social Security, maybe going part-time. And we did a little memorial service for our team. And it was amazing how many people showed up who haven't even been at Wilbur's for 6 or 8 years.
Yeah.
And realizing that, for some people it's a job, it's a transaction, but for other people it's a family. And when people come back that, we had one lady, she hasn't worked with us for 15 years, but she still comes in on Saturdays and gets her 6-pack of beer. And she said, I wanted to pay my respects.
Yeah. See, that's awesome when you can transcend the P&L and the dollars and cents. It's humans serving humans, and they're working for you 40, 50, sometimes more hours per week, and you become family. Think about how much time those people dedicate to the business and the cause and everything that it's about. And you don't see too many companies do that. It
has changed. Business has changed, but so has the employee pool. It used to be every person's going to have 7 or 10 or 12 jobs by the time they retire. Mm-hmm. Well, I think that number's like 20 now.
Yeah.
So the length of stay for people is shortening. And back to that fork, that multi-prong of competitiveness, of building a team. The other one is I love what I do. Yeah. And I'm sure you can tell because I'd ramble all day. You love what you do. And all of a sudden when you're like, okay, I'm 44 years old and I've been doing this longer than most of my peers, it's kind of weird to be like, why are they asking me how to fix this? Like, shouldn't somebody else know? And then you realize, oh, maybe I do know what I'm talking about.
Yeah. Just after a couple decades.
But again, there's certain days you don't know. And I tell people all the time, sometimes you have to set a direction and say, hey, here's where we're going. Let's get there. And then halfway through, you're like, I was wrong.
Yeah.
And the ability to admit that things have changed or this is a different situation and we need to regroup.
Love that. One thing you mentioned, and we were joking about this even before, but I get this a lot. There's times when I can just be a dick or be called a dick, right? We're direct personality styles. We're straight shooters. There's a problem. We attack it. We solve it. We get it done, right? But talk about that difference, because you shared this in the example of somebody who, I don't even know what business it was in, but everybody knows this person in the community is just not a nice person. Like, he's not just getting it done. He's cruel to humans as another human. So how do you balance that? Like, how do you just say what needs to be said? Because you can't get walked on. You can't not address problems because you'll get steamrolled, run right out of business, right out of town. Then the flip side is you just come off hard all the time and you're just nasty. So how do you play in that space? Because for me back in the day, I was pretty hard charging all the time, and I've learned to balance that out. But what do you do? We're very similar.
It's hard because working with my dad, my hero, I worked with him for 15 years, actually going on 20 some at this point in different facets and different things. And it was interesting because my dad is so nice, like 96% of the time. But that 4%, you're like, holy shit, did he just say that? And he did, or he was very direct. And it's a hard one because I tell people, I am so easy to deal with as long as you're doing what you're supposed to be doing. It's when, we need to change a direction or change what we're doing. And there's times that you try to coach people to hear, and you try to do it with humanity. Because, I make mistakes every day still, and you learn from those mistakes. The gentleman we were talking about before, and this is going to sound bad, but he enjoyed it. He enjoyed being mean, and not even just disagreeing with people, but being ruthless. And you're going to run into some of those people. And like I was saying downstairs, I'm like, there's plenty of people I don't jive with that I respect. We have different levels of different ways of dealing with stuff, but there's also a humane side to them. Yeah. It's when people are just nasty to be nasty that sometimes I look at that, and this is going to sound bad, but you emulate, like we were talking about mentors before. And every interaction you have, you go, hey, this guy may be really bright, but this is what I don't want to do. And you don't have to voice it to him, but you have to go, hey, you know what? I see a little bit of that part I don't like in him and me. And so how do I not do that? And like you said, hey, the ability to apologize.
Hey, I was wrong. Sorry.
Or I owned it. I apologized to one of our guys the other day, and I'm so proud of him. He's, in our industry, we all probably drink more than normal folks do, but it's a slippery slope. And this young man, to his credit, he has been sober for 2 years. Can't have a drink. He said, I'm not the I can have a beer and watch a football game guy. I have to have 10 beers. And we were joking about something, and I called him out, give him a hard time. And on my ride home, I said, that was fucked up. Like, he's 2 years sober. He's turned a new leaf. It's one thing one-on-one to give him a hard time, but to do it in front of the group, shame on me. And yesterday I told him, I said, hey, I won't use names, but I said, I was wrong, and I'm really sorry. And it was funny because he's like, I didn't think twice about it. We have that relationship. But for me, it was gnawing at me that.
But you did. And you felt it at the core.
It right
after
upset
you
me.
said it, you're like, oh. Yeah,
when it's one-on-one, you can give people some shit. But in front of a group, and I was kidding around, but I'm like, why did I do that? Like, I'm really proud of him. And he is crushing it, and like literally got all his stuff together. And you're like, why'd you have to do that? And you look in the mirror and go, he's killing it. I need to be better than this.
Yeah. So calling yourself out. No, and I watch that and encourage others to watch that. If you say, do something, you just get hit at that gut level, like, ooh, wasn't okay. I had to call somebody the other day. Well, I went into the bank the other day, and it was the first time I was taking Riley to the bank. It's a fun story how it ends up. I roll into Chase Bank. Riley's got a big bag of change in dollars, and hey, you're going to pour it out. They're going to count it up and deposit it into your account. And it's this young kid's first day. Right? First time Riley's going to the bank. Maybe 20-year-old kid working there. Riley puts the money out, and like he's never seen money before. So it was very slow. It was taking forever, and the longer it took, the worse it got. And I just popped off. I'm like, hey, can you get somebody that knows how to do this? And I wasn't nice about it, right? And I felt bad. So Riley's like, is this how the bank's supposed to go? I'm like, no, it's not. So we go talk about it. I'm like, I'm sorry. So like, next time I go into the bank, I apologize to him. And then I apologize to the gal. I'm like, I'm sorry. It's kind of an a-hole. So she's like, that's okay. I'll just call you a-hole when I see you. Because she's a sweetheart. I see her all the time. So I walk into the bank and we're like, hey, a-hole. But you just gotta apologize, And yeah, love that about you, man. Love that.
And retail, it's interesting because I tell everybody you should work service, so bar, restaurant, whatever, or retail at some point in your life.
Yep.
Because there's times, that I've said things you wish you could take back. And once it's out, it's out. And I think having the humility to own it. And then the other one is with our kids, it was really funny. We were in Portland actually right before COVID. And my daughter was doing competitive cheerleading, which is like joining a cult kind of. You travel, it is insane.
That's what I've heard.
Insane. But I'm glad we did it. And we were at a hotel, And the day before we left, the lady at the front desk, she goes, "You've worked in hotels before, haven't you?" And I was like, "No, I haven't." "Why?" And she goes, "Because your kids are respectful and they're kind and they say please and thank you." And I said, "Well, I work retail." And she said, "Exactly. You do something with people, because when she calls you a-hole, in the scheme of things, you aren't the asshole. You're very minuscule compared to what they're really dealing with.
Yes.
But in your mind, you're like, shit, I handled that wrong." Mm-hmm. And, it is interesting because I tell people soft skills, like in the liquor store industry, we are the best C students around. None of us are Rhodes Scholars, but you learn those soft skills. Yeah. You learn those soft skills banging on doors.
Banging on doors, bussing tables at the Red Dragon, the Chinese restaurant, Subway. Yeah. When you're in an industry where a lot of people coming by and you're offering them whatever, and even true to painting to this day, right? If something doesn't go their way, if their sandwich isn't right or whatever, they're gonna let you know. And you get 3 to 5% of people are just either crazy or just out to be pretty nasty, right? Just to be able to catch that and take that, and handle that, and manage that. Then not become that, right?
Well, and I would argue for us, 99% of our customers are, and we deal with a lot of people. We had probably 600,000 people through the front door last year in Fort Collins, probably 700,000 in Longmont. Now, some of those people we saw every Friday, every week of the year for their 6-pack of beer. But I would argue most people overall are delightful. It's those outliers. And for us, the big one the last few years, and we could go down a whole rabbit hole here, was the transient population. Because, like I said, we don't discriminate. As long as you're 21 and have money and not drunk or high, we want you. Now, we changed that. I said, not drunk, high, or an asshole. And it's because we can deny service to people because of how they treat our team. And I think that's something early on I didn't learn of, people say the customer is always right. I will argue customers are wrong.
Nope. Yep. You are correct.
And it's one thing to be wrong, and I can deal with that. It's when you're nasty to our team. And unfortunately, people aren't yelling at you and I. They're yelling at your college kid who's been in the job for 2 weeks. And I tell people, I'm like, be super nice to that kid and yell at me. I'm fine with it.
Because we can take it. We've seen it before, right?
Yeah.
We've had it before. And I love that because as you were talking on the one side of when we're wrong, we apologize because we crossed the line. We overstepped. We weren't kind. But on that flip side, and I love this about you because I know you do this, it's like we have a no dick, jerk, a-hole policy here. That was one of our core values is kindness. And we're going to be kind. We might mess that up. We'll ask for forgiveness. We'll reset that. But yeah, we've had a couple instances here, and I think you did too, where they come in and they think they can talk to you that way. And then they find out pretty quick, like they're not doing business with you. We're not doing business with you for that.
Oh, I tell people all the time, we try hard every day, but we fail miserably. Yep. Like we fail daily, but give us a chance to fix it because we do want to do right. One of my favorite stories, and I think I told you this, in Fort Collins, we have a front-end manager named Frankie. She's been with us 10 years. She's delightful. She is hilarious because she can take the most irate person and she calls it customer service and the shit out of them. And all of a sudden they're happy and they're laughing and they're leaving.
Flips them. Yeah.
But we had an issue about 2 years ago. It was after a year of masks. A gentleman was in the store, refused to wear his mask. Our cashiers at this point were tired and just said, "Hey, sir, you have to do this." And he started berating the cashier. And, our cashier was in the wrong. What he said was probably not ideal, but Frankie inherited it. And, customer service and the guy, and it was a guy and his wife. And, "I'm so sorry. We're going to do this." And he basically threw out the C word at her. And so she came upstairs and she said, "Matt, I just want you to know, I refused service to him and I fired the customer and I told him he's not coming back." I said, "Okay, I'm in your corner." Like there's certain lines in the sand we don't cross.
That's one.
That is definitely
absolutely one. Yeah.
But the cherry on top of this is about 2 months later, a dozen roses showed up and a note, and it was the gentleman who was at the store's wife, because she was there and watched all this happen. And you could tell, according to the video, she was just mortified. And the note, she came and basically said, I'd been really unhappy for a long time. And after the way I saw him treat you that day, I went home and I filed for divorce. And you're like, because she's like, he's behaving this way in public. You should have seen what he was like behind closed doors.
Yeah, you couldn't even imagine if that's what's out, just showing up to somebody you don't know. And like to Frankie, right? Frankie's the happiest. We had the same thing. Kathleen here, she runs our book. We had a guy not pay us for a year on an insurance claim where he got all the money up front and ignored our 14 emails and 12 phone calls. And we can see you opened up the QuickBooks invoice 13 times. And I'm just working, having a busy day. Kathleen forwards me the phone call. Our phone system records all the phone calls. She called up, hey, it's Kathleen. I just wanted to let you know, I'm so glad I got a hold of you. We've been trying to get a hold of you and just wanted to let you know that this account is way past due. And at this point, we send it to collections. Like, that's what happens. We've communicated with you dozens of times. Yep, he dropped the C word. He dropped call. That's how he opens up. Well, see you next Tuesday. And F you and F this, and I didn't get my money. And who's your owner? I'm going to come pay him a visit. She's like, okay. So she calls him back and says, sure, like Matt's here Tuesday and Thursday. 10:30 is a good time. So that's right before I'm teaching jiu-jitsu day class. And I mean, the way he talked to her, because I'm going to come pay you a visit, that means something. It means something where I was originally from, New Jersey. Like, well, I know what that means. We know what that meant. So I'm waiting for this guy to come pay me a visit. I think The Rock is going to walk through the door, like Brock Lesnar size, somebody like that. And this little dude in his 50s comes in, and I'm up here. This is my office at the time, right? And Kathleen's like, I'll go talk to him and see if he's still behaving like the way. Comes in, hey, how's it going? Hey, let's go get this figured out. We'll get the insurance papers. And all of a sudden he starts up on her again. And now he's here in person. So I came down. Hey, heard you wanted to pay me a visit. So I gave him a couple of options. I'm like, you're talking like you want to fight. So are you here to fight? Because I gave him a waiver. I gave him the waiver that you sign when you come in here. And I said, you can sign this. And if you want to go do that, fine. But you don't want to do that. And I was like, you don't talk to her like that ever. So you're paying us. And we're never coming back to work for you again. And just don't talk to people like that, man.
Well, and it's interesting because I tell people, again, we deal with a lot of people, but that's the last thing you want. And, unfortunately, over the years, we've had situations, and normally, there's more of us than there are of them. We just want them to leave. Yeah. And ours is cash and carry, so it's not like we've already done the work, but you do get some folks that, I've talked with our team the other day. I'm like, guys, guess what? We sum up every customer walking through the door. And that's a safety thing. Because when you think about places that get robbed, it's banks, convenience stores, and us. Yeah. So are they wearing a backpack? Are they disheveled? I've had people with a $40,000 ring that were catching shoplifting $5 bottles of wines. And then we've got the homeless guy with nothing who he makes sure he pays every time, and he's super nice to our cashiers. Yeah. And so dealing with Joe Public and back to young people, learning those soft skills of how to behave, how transactions work, how to problem solve. It was really interesting last week with the deep freeze. I get a call on Monday, and they're like, Matt, we don't have water. And I'm like, what do you mean we don't have water? Like, Wilbur's is a big store. The heat's on, everything. Well, Whole Foods is doing a renovation, and one of the people turned off their water, but turned ours off as well. And those problem-solving things, looking at our team, they didn't, and this was shame on me, they didn't know where the fire riser room was, much less which big spigots feed in which building. Thank God it was somebody had turned our water off. Not a big deal. But how do you learn that if it were a cracked pipe, if somebody did slip and fall, oh, it is a shoplifter incident. Oh, hey, the power went out. and those things, you guys know, when you're on a job site, God knows what can go wrong. And we had that conversation, the prior owners of our house. You told me when you painted their house, how they treated your team and wouldn't let them run a microwave. And
Yep. Yeah, that was another one where they crossed the line on a lot of different levels. Yeah. So we kind of said, I'm glad you live there now. I'm glad we got to paint that house again, and it's you. We'll just leave it at that.
Well, and
they weren't kind to us. But I also think, looking back, they were maybe going through some health issues or something like that. Not that makes what was said any different,
any better.
Just a little perspective, right? They weren't in a good place.
Well, but those are those learning ones.
Yes.
It's and talking with my kids of guys, every day is going to be a different situation. Most of the time is how you wrap your mind around it of, okay, are we going to tackle this straight on? Or are we going to do an end around? But what are options A, B, and C? And more importantly, just going, hey, here's the plan. The plan may not work. We may change the plan halfway through, but here's how we're going to address it. And don't just take your hands, throw them up in the air, and walk away, because that's not an option.
No. Well, Matt, man, thanks for coming out today. 30 years of friendship. You are one of the real deals here in Northern Colorado. Business owner, business leader. Thanks for everything you've shared.
Thank you for having
me.
me.
Yeah, huge value for kids listening, but also just it's a good reminder of those things as just business owners.
Well, thank you for the friendship, and thanks for having me. These podcast things are new to me, so I'm figuring it all out.
Man. No, I'm proud of you. You did an awesome job. Now, we close the podcast the same way with every guest. You grabbed one of your favorite colors off the color wall, and you have the statement that you want to leave with the world when you leave it. What did you write down?
Okay, so I wrote 2 things down because I'm cheating a little bit. First one is be the inspiration you want to see. And I wholeheartedly mean that you can lead whatever it is and be the light that you want to see out there. The other one is, and this hits home to you and me, is support small business.
Yeah.
I tell people, especially with wine and grocery stores, buy your groceries at the grocery store, buy your booze at the booze store, even if it's not me. Whether it's Liquor Max in Loveland, they're a local family, or Supermarket Liquors, or you name it, M&E Painting or M&E Roofing. When you do business with somebody local, it really does stay in the community. And nothing against chains. I eat, and I gotta buy stuff from big grocers. But when you have the opportunity to make a choice, make sure you give local a shot.
Matt Dinsmore. Thanks, brother. That's a wrap.
Good to see you.
Thanks. Hey, thanks for tuning into this week's episode. Would you make sure to please like, comment, and subscribe to the channel here? And please share this episode with somebody whose life it will make better. I would be extremely grateful if you would go to mattshoup.com and click on the free tools and download those. On my website, you'll find that I've got some things for you wherever you are on your journey in life, leadership, and business. Start with those free tools. Maybe next, check out a couple of my books, my video coaching series, or maybe consider even coming to spend a week with me in Spain on one of my leadership adventures.